Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. We're a show where we blend the love of whiskey with the love of music. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all under Bourbon Turntable. Now, I've got with me Benjamin Eves, Drew Crawley. You can see my name is Kevin Rose. This is our third show, all right? And what I would like to do is I've known you guys. I've known Drew for a while. Ben, I've known you for, I don't know, almost a year maybe. But we've spent a little bit of time together. So what I'd like to do to help the audience get to know the team is you guys will each share something that we know about the other two. Okay. So this could be, we'll keep it non-dangerous. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Sure.
All right. Ben, I'll start, and I'll something that our audience should know about Ben is the dude is a cook and a half. He does some amazing meals. Not that I've ever had any of them, but he sends these fantastic pictures out on these meals that he makes. And he makes some incredible looking cocktails too. So we're at some point we'll do a show where we'll take a break from some of the other stuff, and we'll do some test tasting from Ben's kitchen. So Ben, something you need to know about Ben is he is a great cook and a great designer of cocktails. Now, Drew is one of the most talented musicians I know. He comes across very humble about it, but he's an excellent guitarist, an outstanding pianist. He has a fantastic voice, and he's got some great opportunities ahead of him in writing music, recording music, and I'm just really impressed with his musical talent and ability. So, all right. So, Ben, now you get to tell something about the two of us.
All right. So, Kevin, besides living in Bushwood, there in Kentucky, no, it's a little inside joke we give him a hard time about. But no, Kevin is probably one of the most knowledgeable people about the whiskey business that I've met. He's got a breadth of knowledge here that if you're not familiar outside of the show, you need to get familiar with. And especially with the Bar Cart Co-op, you're going to be seeing articles and other things he's involved with. But I think he asked the important questions. And he just has this amazing knowledge about so many broad categories within bourbon and what's going on in Kentucky, especially. And if you want a resource, in my opinion, he's your guy, because just incredible. Love here every time Kevin provides input, whether it's our show on My Whiskey Den or just personal and private, whatever. You always take note because Kevin's dishing out the real info here. So very good, and I think you're going to see that pay dividends here on this show. Drew, his interest in music is fascinating, but what I love so much and what I get to see with what he shares on his Instagram account is he has turned me on to all these artists and all these people that these groups and stuff that he's sharing music from constantly that I never would have known existed. And he's got an amazing taste in, I think this not only reflects his own personal music skill, but his ability to break down what people are doing. Just an amazing taste in people that can write amazing songs, amazing artistry. And so you should follow him on Instagram because you're going to get introduced to a lot of fantastic artists that otherwise you probably would not have heard of. So.
Yep. All right, Drew, your turn. I've obviously got Ben fooled, so let's see how I've got the wool pulled over your eyes too.
Oh, thank you for your kind words. Well, Ben, you and I have spent maybe the least amount of time together in person,
Yeah.
but we're always going back and forth on socials. So, one of the things I will say about Ben that I've noticed beyond his culinary skills and his mixology skills, uh, this man lives and breathes what he talks about. I mean, he's got a family, he's got a career, he's got these bourbon podcasts. He is a consistent person. What you see is what you get with Ben, and
Mhm.
from smoking cigars on the back porch to taking bourbon tours to messaging back and forth on Instagram, is one consistent dude no matter what's going on. So that's something I've really appreciated about Ben, just in the little bit of time we've had to share together so far.
Yeah.
Kevin, I could talk for hours about you, and I mean this with all sincerity. I'm not just here to blow smoke. Um, Kevin knows his stuff about whiskey. Kevin knows his stuff about music. That goes without saying, and all of the folks tuning in will know that. I'll just say, from a personal standpoint, Kevin is one of the most giving, the most loving, and the most accepting human beings that I've ever been around. There's a lot that I could say, but I would not be here in this world if it wasn't for Kevin Rose and his wife Cindy, and their generosity and love for me. So, whiskey's great. There's a lot of shenanigans. There's a lot of BS out there. But one of the things I'm most grateful for that bourbon and music brought in my life is my friendship with Kevin and his wife. So really, really profoundly grateful for them as human beings, not just as music and bourbon geeks.
Yeah.
So
Well, I feel like we need a group hug or something
Yeah.
after that. I wasn't sure how that would go, but I thought it would be interesting, and I appreciate the kind words that you guys had to say, and I hope that the folks that are watching and listening look forward to getting to know some of them a lot better, and hopefully we're going to be pretty transparent and authentic in whether we're talking about whiskey or we're talking about music or we're talking about life. So if you pay attention, you'll get to know the real us as well. So well, coming up a little later, we are going to be talking about our first albums, the first albums that we ever bought, and it's a very diverse selection tonight. So I think that you'll enjoy that. But first, we have some bourbon to talk about, and I'm going to start us off. I am drinking Stumpy Spirits Old Monroe bourbon. This is actually this is a rye. He makes some. Adam Stumpf makes some fabulous rye. All of his stuff is great, but man, some of his rye is just top notch. It can't be beat. This one is a 100% rye, and it was actually a store pick in Dean's Liquors over in I think that's in Southern Illinois, which is where Stumpy's is located. And this one is uh, very much a cherry cola note in there that's just fantastic. So I'm drinking Stumpy's Old Monroe. Ben, how about you?
And I'll back you up on that Stumpy's. That stuff is fantastic. It's making some great whiskey. So
Hmm.
tonight I'm digging into a bottle that's new to me, a distillery that's new to me, and a distillery that's actually relatively new, period, here in the state of South Carolina. It's the Burnt Church Distillery
Hmm.
down in Bluffton, and this is one of their first releases. They'll call it the Bluffton Whiskey. It's got an interesting mash bill of malt, oats, and Carolina Gold rice.
Wow.
Coming in at 47.5%. They've aged it for right at 2 years. It's an exciting new distillery we have here down in the lower part of the state. I've been following them since they got started. They're, as the name implies, the distillery lies in the rebuild of an old burnt church. It's a gorgeous place. Looking forward to some visits there.
Hmm.
Um, but they've got some great spirits coming out. But this one's been interesting for a distillery and their first release. A lot of times with craft, you typically come in with expectations set pretty low, but they've pretty well far exceeded that with this one. It's well put together. It's maybe a little rough around the edges, but quite honestly, I think you want that because that rice comes in really sweet on this. You
Mhm.
can taste that rice grain coming through. There's a sweetness. There's some nice notes coming in from the oats and from the malt. I'm starting to get a little cherry out of this that I wasn't before. There's a little bit of barrel char coming through that plays well with everything going on there. So I'm excited to see what comes out from there. But so far for a first release, they're setting the bar pretty good on that.
Awesome. I've not had a lot of whiskey with rice in the mash bill, so
Right.
I look
So
forward to trying that sometime.
yeah, a bit of heirloom grain, if you will. Was very famous around here because that's the type of rice that was grown a lot since colonial times
Mhm.
up through now, and they're finding ways to start to put that to use in some spirits around here. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Very cool. How about you, Drew? What are you drinking?
So I don't have a bottle because I got this as a sample from a buddy, but I am drinking the Blue Note 17 year.
Oh,
This
wow.
is from the
Wow.
folks over in Memphis, Blue Note Distillery.
Mhm.
They're sourcing this. Obviously, they've only been in production, I think a little over 3.5 years now. So I believe this is Barton Distillate, just
Mhm.
over 100 proof. It's 101.9 on this barrel. Um, it's really, really interesting. It's not what you would think of when most of us think about Barton. We have a few things in mind. Um, but this one comes through with just tons and tons of like apple and black pepper. So really,
Wow.
really tasty. It's kind of an approachable proof point. 17 years. I kind of expected it to be like, licking a coffee table,
Right.
especially, at that proof and all that kind of stuff. But it's really, really good. It's got a really long finish. I get a little bit of like almond or something else on the back end of it. But yeah, really was excited to try this. I got a buddy that was down from Memphis.
Mhm.
He was kind enough to pick up a bottle for himself. He couldn't get one for me. It was limit one, but he poured me a little sample before he left. So yeah, that's what I'm sipping on tonight.
Awesome. That's
Great.
it's an interesting one. I have not tried that one yet. Look, so hopefully can find a sample of that somewhere as well. So, Ben, you want to give us a toast?
So my first foray into the community of whiskey involved a group called the Whiskey Tribe, and they have a toast they do with their show every single day, and it's just become ingrained in our culture with that in our group and in friends. And so, here's to fighting, stealing, and drinking. If you fight, may you fight for a friend. If you steal, may you steal a lover's heart. And if you drink, may you drink with me. Cheers.
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 All right. So we're bringing side A of the show to a close. But before we do, I want to tell you about a friend that we've got. And if you watch My Whiskey Den, you're going to know who this guy is. And if you should watch it every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Um, the the really, really unusually tall gentleman to the right there in that picture is Mike Lysick. And Mike is the person who is kind enough to design our logo and the Bourbon Turntable graphics that you see on here. He's just a super, super guy. And this was taken at Three Boys Distillery when Ben and Mike and Patrick were all together. And this young lady here is Christy Atkinson. And I'll just leave it at that for right now. I won't take any pot shots at Christy. Um,
We
she's
all love you,
fantastic.
Christy.
Christy's fantastic, and we'll have her on at some point as well. But so we're closing out side A. We're going to take a quick break and turn this over to side B, where we'll be talking about our first albums. Ben, tell us a little bit about Stave and Bean.
Stave and Bean. You can find them at staveandbean.com, Instagram, Facebook. They're a company started by Corey and John Waddell and Corey Welch. They are sourcing some fantastic high quality beans. They're aging those in very special different barrels, coming up with some amazing combinations. They've even got a line up that is what they call their cocktail line, the Manhattan, the Sidecar, the Old Fashioned, using things like Curacao barrels, Amaro barrels, rye, bourbon barrels, creating blends that are coming with these incredible flavors. It's really seriously high quality beans. They're expertly roasted. Um, John and Corey are really watching these things in the barrel, so when they hit that perfect note at the right moment, they're taking these out of the barrel. They're getting them roasted. They're getting them bagged. They should be on the shelf and available to you now. So check
Awesome.
those out. Get those beans ordered and enjoy some incredible coffee.
Awesome. All right. So thanks, Ben, for sharing a little bit about Stave and Bean. Those are really great guys. I trust them, have confidence in everything they're going to do with this is going to be really high quality.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're kicking off side B here of the show, we're going to talk about our first albums. And tell you what, Drew, let's start with you. And what was your first album?
Sounds good. All right. So I need to preface this. We've mentioned on some previous episodes, but I grew up in a preacher's home. So first album was probably something by the Gaither Vocal Band. If we're talking about first albums that I listened to in their entirety.
Yeah.
Or at
But
least produced by Bill Gaither.
most likely also that. Yeah. But the first album that I remember going to a record store and buying for myself was an album by the band Blink-182 called Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. Masturbatory humor aside, it is a fun album. I was very into the punk rock scene at the time. You could find me wearing the tightest orange jeans imaginable, wallet chains, faux hawk hair. That was kind of my whole vibe at the time. Um, and this album is, in hindsight, not that great. It's just kind of a joke from start to finish, but it's a fun one either way. So this album came out in 2001. It's the sophomore album from Blink-182. The band's gone through several different iterations over the years, but the three kind of founding and core members that have come in and out are a gentleman named Mark Hoppus, a guy named Tom DeLonge, and then Travis Barker. So those three guys kind of make up the core of the band. They've all come in and out over the years. But this one comes out, and it's kind of an interesting time in terms of punk and post-punk music because you've got this huge wave, in the late 80s, early 90s of punk music as a subculture and a genre that was trying to make a point. It was counterculture of the time. You got bands like Fear in the late 80s. You got bands like Nirvana. Then, coming into this time, you got bands that are not necessarily punk per se, but people like Muse and the Beastie Boys and Rage Against the Machine. They're all trying to say something with their music. And then these three knuckleheads show up from San Diego, and they're like, yeah, we're going to make some albums, about going on dates and going to shows and all the things that teenage boys get into, and I'll just leave it at that. So this album kind of comes in, and it's for commercial release. It's not trying to say much of anything. So they get famous with their first album, or their first, big release, Enema of the State, in the late 90s, and then this one comes out in 2001. You've got some songs on there that are absolutely iconic to kids my age. I say that with air quotes because nothing that Blink-182 has ever done is really iconic. But songs like Rock Show and First Date and Stay Together for the Kids, these are all the songs that I grew up learning to play and then covering in the very first very crappy punk bands that I was in high school. So, the legacy of the album may not stand out, over time, but there's some really cool pieces of this as you dig into it. It was produced by a guy named Jerry Finn. For those of us familiar with some of the not Christian, but Christian artists, whatever world, this guy worked for MXPX. He worked for POD. He worked with a lot of those people, and then also Green Day,
Mhm.
Rancid, a lot of the spin-off bands from Blink-182, like Sum 41 and Angels and Airwaves. This guy is kind of the sound of that. I don't know if you want to call it commercial punk. That might be too strong of a label, but kind of this departure from punk as a means of political messaging or whatever you want to say it. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I really wore this thing out growing up. It was in the CD player of my crappy high school car all the way until I moved to college. Out here in Kentucky. The only thing I will say, and I'll kind of wrap this up, there's three members of this band. Tom DeLonge and Mark Hoppus aren't all that much to write home about, but if you really listen to Travis Barker as a drummer, he is just
Right.
impressive as hell. Maybe one of the most energy-adding drummers. You see a lot of these people, most recently artists like Lord and Willow Smith,
Mhm.
asking for Travis Barker features on their songs because he has a sound and an energy that he can add to a track that very few other people can. We acknowledged a couple weeks ago it's Neil Peart and John Bonham at the top, and then everybody else is kind of tier two. But I would put Travis Barker up there in tier two as far as one of those people. You hear him, you know exactly who it is, you know exactly the energy that he's bringing, and he's doing something that very few others can do. So, yeah, that's my first record. I don't have a lot of other information about it. I don't look back on it with a lot of fondness with anything other than nostalgia, but it was a good time in those days.
Do you feel like they were just trying to fill an obligatory contract, second album? Let's just get something out after that first one and
Yeah,
touring and whatnot.
yeah, I think there's something to that for sure. I mean, they were on tour at the time, I believe, with Green Day and the All American Rejects,
Mm-hmm.
and so they were the opening band. At the time, I don't remember what the tour was called that they were on, but it was definitely the trap a lot of bands fall into with the sophomore album is okay. We did something we were really passionate about, and we had 3 years to write it and figure it
Mhm.
out, and arrange it, and play in all these clubs. And now the label says we have a year to turn out something else.
Right.
It definitely does kind of have that feel to it for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a trap for a lot of bands with that sophomore album. That's why it makes it so
Yeah.
difficult to have a good one. But for me, I never was a big Blink 182 guy. Just
No.
it hit at a time point for me. It's like, okay, they're catchy. They come on the radio. That's cool. I'll jam out to them. But yeah, just never was my thing. That's what almost you said. What'd you call it? Commercial punk.
Commercial
Commercial
punk.
Kind of
punk,
so
yeah,
like pop punk would be
yeah,
how I almost would define the sound. But at the same time, it feels like they're hugely popular. It's like they caught that, I don't know, they kicked in at the right time when music was a certain way, and they come in and provide this little bit of a funky left turn or right turn
Mhm.
that to me almost defines slacker music in a way.
yeah,
Their whole the connection they have with that age group and that crowd. Uh, Really cool. But
yeah.
yeah, I
It's
never caught up. To me, the interesting thing now is Tom DeLonge and his involvement with the To the Stars Academy and his whole UFO researching.
yeah,
That's like, where did that come from? But at the same time, I
pretty
find it
cool.
really fascinating. So
Well, Travis Barker dates a Kardashian now and all that
yeah,
stuff. It's
Oh wow.
interesting life choices these gentlemen have made. One other thing I wanted to mention, and maybe you guys could speak into this. This album came out in 2001, and
Mhm.
that's 9/11 happens in 2001, and there's a big time cultural shift
yep,
in American pop culture as a whole, the music specifically. You have people like Toby Keith and the courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, and you
right,
have people
Mhm.
taking some things real seriously. And then you have this whole kind of subculture that is kind of into it to escape, to be irreverent, to just
right.
get away from all that crazy stuff that our parents are into and what the culture is doing. I'm just curious if you guys see parallels in that trend with other artists, or if there's something else, a bigger movement going on there that you had noticed at the time.
That's an awesome question
Yeah, it is a good
because
question.
yeah, that really gets me to dig back. I think there you did see artists who were already established. There were a lot of them that took a very what you would call a patriotic turn, especially in country music.
Mhm.
And then there were others that took, obviously like Green Day took a very hard political stance in the other direction.
Mhm.
But to me, it's like my question with Blink 182 is okay, that's when they burst on the scene, but obviously they've probably been around as a band working on that sound and that whole vibe that they give before that. But I think not so much what they brought, but just the fact that their message was something that so many people could connect with, in that there's so much crap going on in the world right now. And it's hard, it's confusing, it hurts with the whole 9/11 and the war on terror going down, the economy, different things like that going on. And so that comes along, and like you said, it's an escape. It's just like, you know what, screw all that.
Mhm.
Let's just rock out to this. And like I
Mhm.
said, kind of that slacker mentality. The heck with the real world. Let's go escape for a while. And that was kind of a great avenue for that. So
Yeah, I think that it um, the turn towards everything being patriotic and the most important thing being um, you know, loving the country and that kind of thing. Um, I think that was fairly unanimous for a short while.
Yep.
Um, and but it didn't really stick around.
yeah,
Um, it did, like you say, it did for country music, and I think still does today in some circles in country. But a whole lot of rock music. I think they were very supportive of, um, remembering the people that died on 9/11, uh, and supportive of um, the the people that were fighting to protect us. Um, Maybe not necessarily the war effort itself, but um, I think a lot of rock music just went right on along, like most of the country did.
Mhm.
I mean, I remember, um, I remember that time, and pretty vividly, um, and what I was going on then.
yeah.
But as far as the lasting effect that it had on rock music, I don't know that it did. Um, is that kind of
Great, no, great analysis. I was really curious. Just I was very young at the time,
mhm.
and I had an affinity for this album when I was a teenager, and now looking back at it, it holds a unique or interesting place to me as far as the history of music. And so I was just
Mhm.
curious, as guys that were a little bit more, uh, you know, in the scene at the time, what you
Yeah,
guys would have thought. So I
Yeah.
appreciate the thoughtful engagement with that. Sorry for the curveball, but
no, that's fine.
I enjoyed
Great.
hearing what you thought.
No, I thought it was a great question, and
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe at some point we can explore that kind of thing a little bit more, as far as music and the culture of the moment,
Mm.
um, which we can probably do with music that's out, that's been out in the last year.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that would be something fun to
And
explore and be able to talk about. But as far as Blink 182, I was never a fan of that band. Um, I'll go back and listen to some of it based upon your comments on the drummer. But to and maybe that's the old guy, okay, boomer in me. Yeah, Blink 182. It was every song was it was the same. It
Hmm.
just felt the same to me, and I didn't feel like they had a whole lot interesting to say. Um, but I'll go back and listen to some of it and take in the drums especially.
I
So
will say, for sure, I think their message in their songs, as just lighthearted as it really was overall,
mhm,
it really connects with a particular age group, because I think for the majority of people, you reach a certain point in age, unless you grew up listening to that. And so there's that whole nostalgia thing. If it came out like for me or you being older, there's just no connection to what they're singing about. Really, it's like I've done gone and lived that and moved on. That doesn't mean anything to me anymore. But when you're a teenager, you're a young guy, and that's hitting you right where life is at the moment, then absolutely. I think that's maybe describes what the connection is, at the same time what the disconnect is for a lot of people.
Yeah,
that's a good
absolutely.
point. Really good point. Really good point. All right, well, I'm going to go next, and my first album that I bought, and you would have to have been a kid or a teenager, back in the 70s to probably even know what this is. But there was a company called K-Tel, and they would release compilation albums. And my first album was one of these compilation albums, and it was called Right On. and
Wow.
I still have it. I still have it. But this was the Spotify of the day. This is how you got to learn and know what new music was. Okay, so I'm going to cut just to give you a sense of what all this is. Side one of the album was I'll just scan through some of these. Opening track, Tin Lizzy, Boys Are Back in Town. That's fantastic. I love it. Then Heart Magic Man and Firefall. Either of you guys ever hear the group Firefall?
Can't say I'm familiar.
Probably not. You Are the Woman was the name of the song. You are the woman that I'll always dream of. Anyway, I'll try not to sing anymore. Then there was an Electric Light Orchestra song called Strange Magic. Bay City Rollers, Saturday Night. You guys know that, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Love Machine by the Miracles. Lou Rawls has a tune on here. Elton John, the Commodores, Just to Be Close to You. There's an ABBA song. There's a song by the band War. There's a band called Pilot that had a song called Magic. And one of my favorites is the song Daz by Brick. So again, there are maybe 3 songs on here that people would know or have a chance to know today. But this is a very diverse group of songs. You've got, rock with things like The Boys Are Back in Town. You've got some pop kind of music with the Bay City Rollers. There's a Diana Ross song on here. So you got some disco stuff, that and the Miracles and Brick. Elton John. It's just a wide variety of songs. And these K-Tel albums were how people my age got to try and learn new music, other than you're sitting around listening to the radio waiting for them to play something different. Now, this company still exists today. They're not doing compilation albums anymore, but they've got the rights to, a few hundred songs. And so when they play them in commercials or movies or TV shows, they get paid. And I have something in common with Dave Grohl. One of his first album was also a K-Tel album. So he credits a K-Tel compilation album with getting his for really piquing his interest in music. So, me and Dave, we got it going on.
You're the same, basically, is what I hear.
Basically the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. I love that.
And I couldn't believe I still have
that
it.
album. That album for me, that probably demonstrates exactly why I have such a love-hate relationship with the 70s music wise. Probably more than any other decade. I mean,
Yeah.
even going way back. I have a deep, almost hatred of disco music. But then there's some of the classic rock and stuff that comes out of the 70s period. I absolutely love some of the experimental sounds and things that are going on. But then there's other genres that just absolutely, if it's on, turn the freaking radio off, man. I can't take it. Which there's few music genres that are like that for me, but disco is one.
There's a lot of music that I think gets classified as disco that I think is just fantastic. I think you look at a band like Chic, you look at Earth, Wind and Fire, and Diana Ross, even Commodores. Uh, Man, that they had some really really great music, but there's some really bad disco music too, and I would not argue that. And we'll maybe we'll do a disco show at some point and uh, get to talk about some of that.
Best disco song I've ever heard is White Zombie's remake of Boogeyman. That's the way you do it right there.
Well, yeah, Foo Fighters came out with a disco album.
You're right.
They
Okay,
did.
Or
They did.
a Bee Gees. They covered I think 4 Bee Gees songs and 1 Andy Gibb song, and
yeah.
So there's that connection, and me and Dave, we got a lot in common now. So. Oh man! All right, Ben, it's your turn, buddy. What do you got?
I got a big one here. So early 80s, every single Saturday morning pretty much was at my cousin's house, walking up the road. We lived next door. He was basically like a brother, but we talked music all the time. Casey Kasem's Top 10 Countdown show on Saturday mornings. We'd be there to watch it to see what's the latest drop, what's the latest music. And from there, for me, that was my introduction to Michael Jackson. And that was, I think, around 82, right in there, 82, 83. The Thriller album came out. And so that was the first album where I said, I'm saving my money. I am buying that one. Mom, take me to the music store. I've got to have Thriller. I wish I still had that album. I have no idea what happened to it over the years growing up. But one of my favorite memories is playing the title track Thriller with all the creepy dialogue that goes on in there. For my sister, Vincent Price, exactly. The classic voice. So playing that for my sister right before bedtime, she was a few years younger, in order to scare the hell out of her and give her nightmares. But no, still, I mean, I've listened to that album. It hasn't been that long ago that I sat down and just worked through the tracks of that, and just every time I stop and listen to it, I get blown away at track after track after track on that album. Is just freaking fantastic. And it, again, coming out of the disco era, Michael Jackson decided to kind of take that sound a little bit of a different way from what he was doing with the Jackson 5 and whatnot. He explored a lot of different, there's a lot of different influence coming into that album. So you've got some rock, you've got some soul and R&B and some funk, and there's just some really cool sounds going on with the different songs. And then, there's some amazing stories. I mean, you've got the famous Quincy Jones, who produced the album, just absolute master. You've got, he was not given credit, but Eddie Van Halen played the guitar solo on Beat It.
Beat It. Yep.
And I'm trying to remember the story with Eddie. Was he paid with like a case of Coors beer or something like that? I mean, it was some ridiculous thing. He got called in, agreed to do it, and just, whatever, I'll take case of beer and some cocaine or something. And I remember back when Eddie passed here last year, I remember just hearing some of the stories about that. But it's just a really cool album, top to bottom. And it's still, that for me, that was probably one of the biggest albums coming out of the 80s period. That thing went like 33 times platinum. He won just an amazing amount of awards for the songs, for the album. So, and still to this day, the music video for Thriller, that's just legendary. So that was my first album.
I love it, Ben. Man, that's so cool. What's crazy to me you've got out of this whole record, you've got 6 songs that could probably be released today as Michael Jackson singles.
Right.
And the one with the Beatle is the one that's probably the least known on the entire record.
Right.
Right. Right.
Nuts, man.
The Girl Is Mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, most of the, other than the famous Eddie Van Halen guitar solo, most of the instruments on the other songs were played by the band Toto.
Yes.
That's a great fact there. Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't sound like it would fit,
Right.
but it's what it was. I mean, these guys were, you know, basically the session band for Michael Jackson on this, working with Quincy Jones.
And this is the album that launched Michael into absolute superstardom, you know.
Yeah.
He was obviously well known previous to that, but
Sure.
that album, that's when he just became superstar beyond.
Yeah. Rock With You, I think, was the album before this one.
Yeah.
Which in many ways I like a little better than Thriller, but you know, you can't argue with the commercial success of Thriller.
Right.
Everybody around the world in 1982 to 1984 or whatever it was,
right?
They knew Michael Jackson. They knew these songs. I mean, it's hard to have a more iconic first album.
I mean, everybody was learning how to moonwalk after this album came out.
Yeah.
We were all wearing our parachute pants, breakdancing and moonwalking.
Yeah, I want to have a Halloween party sometime where everybody there learns how to do the Thriller dance.
There you go.
I think that would be awesome. I think that would be an awesome good time. No, those are man, I don't know how you get those are some pretty diverse first albums that we've got. And I think certainly hit different eras in music. And you know, other than Thriller, I mean, Thriller is obviously a fantastic album that's stood the test of time. I don't know that I can say the same thing for the Blink-182 and a lot of the songs on my first album, this KTL compilation album, are things that, you know, when I went back and looked at it, I was like, I don't remember that at all. But there's some stuff on there that has endured. So fun conversation on first albums. Now, I will say this, my first, and you guys may not have ever never did this, but my first 45, you know what the first 45 that I got was Prince, Wanna Be Your Lover. So that was pretty cool.
Nice.
I think I've still got that around here somewhere too. So that we'll have a Prince conversation again for another day.
That will have to happen. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Anything surprise you guys in the conversation here, or what anybody had as their favorite or as their first album?
I think for Drew, the Blink-182, because hearing, you know, you coming out of a similar background as me, it's surprising, and yet it's not, because coming from the same background as I did to a degree, you know, having that Christian music, that whole background, and then it's just like full pendulum swing. How rebellious can I be? Type thing going on. And
definitely,
I didn't realize you had that whole, you know, especially with what you play and what you're interested in now. I didn't realize either you quite had that early punk influence going on. So
yeah, it was a phase, a regrettable one, but definitely a part of the journey.
Well,
right.
It's
so are you into what I look at is like coming out of the 90s, 2000s. Yeah, at 90s, 2000s, like a resurgence in punk music, kind of a punk revival. It's just my own personal take on it. So who were the bands that you were really into that hit? Because for me, going back punk, it was, you know, it was the Ramones, it was Black Flag, it was stuff like that. But I'm sure it's a little bit different.
Yeah, it was. So mine was a little bit later than those. Everybody, you got to do hats off to The Cure. You got to do hats off to Ramones. So for me, it was Nirvana, specifically the In Utero album. I didn't know Nevermind existed until I was maybe 18 years old. I literally had never heard a track off that except for maybe Smells Like Teen Spirit. But then it was Green Day, Blink, it was the Foo Fighters, All American Rejects, Yellow Card. The big one for me was Dashboard Confessional. If you want to think about pop punk, um, Chris Carrabba and the rest of that band, unbelievable songwriters. You just wouldn't know it unless you were into that particular medium. So that was kind of the way that I caught, kind of coming out of the CCM and youth music. And I think, the gateway drug for me, and maybe this is unique to the time that I kind of grew up in, but it was bands like Switchfoot and Need to Breathe that were these like transitory bands. They get you out of, the Christian music scene a little bit further, but not quite. Maybe as artistically uninhibited as we would consider, good musicianship to be now. So that was kind of what it was for me. Those three or four bands were kind of the ones that I fell in love with, and then as things progressed, at least in my own individual journey, I fell in love with the people that influenced those guys. So from Dashboard Confessional and Blink 182, it became Blaze Foley and John Prine and Jason Isbell and all these other folks that kind of are in similar veins as far as what they were influenced by and what they're trying to say, but from a little bit more authentic, maybe, or a little bit more deep place. And that sounds very pretentious, and I don't mean it to. But it was just kind of the evolution for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will wrap it up for this show. Ben, you want to talk about another program or effort we've got going on with Bar Cart?
The Bar Cart Co-op, we've got a mashup, if you will, of two guys. I'm gonna try very hard to pronounce his name correctly. Jack Bugadola Togale. Not sure if that's exactly right, but he is the Hood Sommelier. You can find him on Facebook and Instagram. You've also got Timothy Von Ripper, who is a single barrel snob, and together they produce a show on Mondays called Mondays Suck. And they take some fantastic dives into bourbon and whiskey of all types, and as well as appearances at distilleries. They interview different people within the industry, and they have some very frank and just incredible discussions about hot topics going on. They're two fantastic guys, two great people, great friends. Love those guys, and it's a great show. So you definitely check that out.
Good guys. Drew, want to tell everybody what we've got coming up next?
Yeah, absolutely. Join us next week. We're going to be doing something that's fun for all of us in the bourbon community and drinking a blind sample. So Ben and myself will be surprised. We're looking forward to that. We're also going to be doing on side B, our music segment, an entire deep dive into one Mr. Michael Jackson. So looking forward to that as we, kind of break down the King of Pop. That'll be fun.
King of Pop. It will be fun. So again, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. Tell your friends, if you don't mind, please share the posts that we've got. Comment on the shows when we post them. We will take your comments to heart. We actually will also be having a live show coming up before too long. We'll mix those in every now and then we'll add playlists that are inspired by the out today. It'll be inspired by the first albums that we bought that we'll post on all of our social media outlets as well. But on behalf of Ben, Drew, and myself, thank you very much for watching and listening, and we really appreciate you and the time that you put in to be a part of the show. So until next time, Love, cheers, and free bird.